Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Monday, April 25th. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Another teenager is under arrest, charged in connection with the stabbing of a black girl in Lakeside. KPBS reporter Kitty Alvarado tells us community advocates say this is a step forward, but still not enough.
The 15-year-old girl arrested by the San Diego Sheriff's Department is charged with attempted murder and a hate crime in connection with the attack. She's said to be the girlfriend of the 16-year-old boy already facing those same charges. She had been taken in for questioning and released before, but in a press release, the department says detectives found the girl played a larger role in the attack than they initially believed.
No, this is by no means justice. Justice would be that all parties are held accountable.
Tasha Williamson with Exhaling Justice says action by law enforcement has been slow and only in response to public outcry.
I don't believe that this arrest would have happened had it not been a push at the town hall and after. Because the mother was clear.
She says from the beginning, the family has told the Sheriff's Department more people were involved in the attack, and their account remains the same. On April 16th, the family was getting out of their car when they saw a group coming towards them.
The girlfriend went to hit the daughter with her metal rod, and the mom blocked it. The mother was struck by the metal rod. She tried to hit her again.
She says justice to the family and community for this alleged hate crime would mean more arrests.
There are witnesses that saw the father standing there doing nothing. This is not acceptable. Again, the father needs to be charged as well.
Williamson says she and others who've been speaking out are now getting death threats. She says some almost made good on those threats at a weekend rally in Lakeside. This is video of that incident.
We were coming in peace. It was an anti-hate rally. They followed us. They walked with our groups, chanting and ranting racist comments, and then they tried to run us over. It was terrifying.
She says justice would mean those who continue to terrorize them and other minorities will be held to account without having to call people out. Because she says even when they tell law enforcement of the threats, nothing is done.
We are not going to be protected by police or FBI or the Attorney General Civil Rights Unit or the DA's office until we are either severely injured or dead.
We reached out to the Sheriff's Department. They did not respond to our requests for an interview, and the DA's office declined to comment. Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
The San Diego Union High School District Superintendent is speaking out tonight. Dr. Cheryl James Ward was placed on administrative leave late last week after making racially biased remarks. She sat down with KPBS education reporter MG Perez to tell her side of the story.
Dr. Cheryl James Ward admits she was wrong. She's apologized, and now she's determined to keep her job as leader of the San Diego Union High School District. 2 weeks ago, during a district meeting on diversity, equity, and inclusion, when the discussion turned to reasons Asian students receive better grades than most students, she characterized and credited the success of Chinese students to wealthy parents and extended Asian families able to support them.
My comment was really about one of the factors, which is indeed a factor. It's a factor. I apologize for the hurt that came out of that, but it was never meant to hurt. It was out of a pure heart.
There has been a tremendous backlash, as seen at 2 recent school board meetings, with demands for Ward's resignation. She also has a mountain of support from parents and community members who believe she is remorseful and valuable to the district's growth, deserving of a second chance after being on the job for just 5 months. Now we've learned Ward filed an undisclosed complaint against board member Michael Allman a month ago, which is being investigated. We also know board president Mo Muir and the other members made a financial offer for her to resign and drop the complaint. Will you resign?
I have no intentions of resigning. I have no intentions of resigning. And, you know, I have time to think about it, but I have no intentions of resigning.
And if they fire you?
Well, that's what they will have to do.
KPBS News reached out to Allman and Muir. The board president told us they have no comment while the matter is in litigation.
It's a teachable moment for every person in this country who is dealing with bullies and bullying. And I stand here today before you to tell them to stand up for what is right.
Ward says she will survive this and is committed to making the district a model for compassion.
Not just a model in terms of academics, but a model in terms of character, a model in terms of how we engage with each other.
That is the final word for now. MG Perez, KPBS News.
San Diego's mayor spent his day in Sacramento asking for more resources to deal with homelessness. The trip north is part of a meeting for the mayors of California's largest cities. They're lobbying to renew funding for programs that they say help serve thousands across the state. Specifically, they are calling for renewal of a grant program known as HHAP that helps cities pay for shelters. In an effort to combat addiction, the San Diego City Council voted today to ban the sale of flavored tobacco and e-cigarettes. But as KPBS reporter Andrew Bowen shows us, not everyone was pleased.
Supporters of the ban gathered outside City Hall ahead of the council meeting. They say big tobacco companies are increasingly using candy-like flavors to get youth hooked on nicotine in hopes that they'll grow into lifelong smokers and vapors.
We know the long-term effect of nicotine use in smoking, and it's imperative that San Diego act now to try and break that cycle once again. This ordinance will help stop the rising rates of adolescent addiction in the city of San Diego, and I'm proud to bring it forward. Smoke and vape shop owners turned out in force to oppose the ban, saying it would result in lost jobs and tax revenue, and that the issue should be decided at the state level. Many said youth rarely get flavored tobacco products from brick-and-mortar stores.
They're getting it from online sources, unregulated and untaxed black market, social media.
The city's ban will take effect next January. California voters will decide in November whether to ban the sale of flavored tobacco statewide. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
Changes are coming to San Diego juvenile detention facilities. As iNews source reporter Jill Castellano tells us, inspectors found probation officers' use of confinement violated state regulations.
Under state law, youth in juvenile detention centers can only be locked in their rooms if they present an immediate danger to themselves or others. But in January, the State Corrections Board found that San Diego probation officers were locking juveniles in their rooms for unnecessarily long periods of time, sometimes for more than 4 hours without a clear justification. Sandy McBrayer is the CEO of the Children's Initiative. She said confinement like this can have long-term consequences.
There is a body of research that has demonstrated room confinement for young people can cause anxiety, stress, and trauma. Equally important is for staff to put strategies in place that limit room confinement and support de-escalation and positive relationship building.
McBrayer's nonprofit has been working with the county to overhaul its youth detention centers. Nathan Fletcher, chair of the County Board of Supervisors, told iNews Source that he's taking the violations seriously and, quote, "We must do better." In response to the findings, officials are implementing trainings, checklists, and a new oversight process. For KPBS, I'm iNews Source investigative reporter Jill Castellano.
iNews Source is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. New drone video shows the devastation in neighborhoods in the suburbs of Ukraine's capital. Sunday marked 2 months since the start of Russia's invasion and the attacks that leaders around the world are calling war crimes. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin visited the country over the weekend. They are the highest-ranking U.S. officials to do so during the war. Today marks the beginning of the Biden administration's Uniting for Ukraine program. It's meant to streamline the immigration process by connecting Ukrainian war refugees with American sponsors. KPBS border reporter Gustavo Solis says it also blocks Ukrainians from entering the United States through land borders.
Once again, our southern border is closed to Ukrainian war refugees. According to the Department of Homeland Security, Ukrainians who present themselves at the border without a valid visa will be automatically denied entry. More than 15,000 Ukrainians have crossed into the U.S. through our southern border since war broke out February 11th. On Sunday night in Tijuana, groups of Ukrainians hurried to the border before midnight. Enrique Lucero is the director of Tijuana's Migrant Affairs Department. He says they were the last to cross.
Se cerró la garrita El Chaparral para ingresos de ucranianos.
Ukrainians who didn't get the memo and arrived to Tijuana after this new policy began will have to find different options. Volunteer organizations are setting up a shelter in Mexico City where Ukrainians can apply for this new program and fly directly from Mexico into the U.S. Lucero expects the numbers of Ukrainian nationals to decrease in Tijuana.
Sí, van a bajar considerablemente.
Approximately 30 Ukrainian nationals arrived to Tijuana Monday morning. None of them will be able to cross the U.S. because of this new policy. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
During this war, we've heard a lot about sanctions and seizing Russian assets. But what does it actually look like? And what can be done with that property? Nick Robertson shows us the luxury SUVs that won't be on Russian streets anytime soon.
Thousands of luxury vehicles not going to Russia. In this corner of the sprawling lot, 200 top-end Cadillac Escalades, street value in excess of $15 million. The spoils of sanctions literally piling up inside Belgium's megaport Zeebrugge, a new front line in Europe's economic war with Russia, pitting Belgian customs agents against Russia's sanctioned oligarchs.
We have been freezing over 200 billion euros of Russian assets. We have also other luxury goods that are being blocked. Momentarily, there are 2,500 containers being blocked for more investigations.
But who actually owns these seized valuables, and can they be sold for money to support Ukraine? It's fast becoming a pressing question, particularly in Europe, feeling the economic pinch of Russia's war. These vehicles aren't Russian-owned yet, but there is plenty of Russian wealth falling under Belgian government control.
There's already 2.7 billion Russian assets that were blocked, were frozen, and then also almost 200 billion transactions that were blocked.
And the goods that have been seized so far, what happens to them? Who owns them?
The transactions, of course, are blocked, and the assets itself are frozen, so they cannot be used anymore. It doesn't mean that they become that the government owns them.
And all these vehicles we're looking at, they all say destination Russia.
Yeah.
In Zeebrugge, shipping terminal boss Mark Adrianson is on the front lines enforcing sanctions. Any vehicle bound for Russia, valued over $55,000, is impounded.
So for the moment we have 8,000 cars started. 8,000 already, yeah.
That's a lot.
That's a lot, although we could get more.
A lot more. He says 120,000 vehicles bound for Russia a year transit his controls. Is already turning some away.
We are not there to store cars. We are there to handle cars and to do added value on cars.
Pressure on Adriansons and Belgium will grow. The war far from over, and trade ties with Russia deep. In the third quarter of last year, Russia was the European Union's largest maritime trading partner, according to EU data. And 1/3 of all those goods coming through ports like this in Belgium and just up the coast in the Netherlands. It could all add up to potentially billions of dollars of goods that could be used to help Ukraine. But turning it into cash requires legal confiscation. not an easy process. European parliamentarians are being warned by EU justice officials.
To get somebody's property confiscated, we need a crime. We are looking for legal solutions, money laundering, embezzlement, perhaps sanction circumvention.
Until then, seized goods and assets will age, while Ukraine's frontline fighters die for fresh weapons. Nick Robertson, Zeebrugge, Belgium.
A high school football coach who lost his job after kneeling down and praying with his team is having his case heard now by the U.S. Supreme Court. Joseph Kennedy lost his job at Bremerton High School in Washington State in 2015 after an opposing coach alerted the school district. He had allegedly been praying on the field for years before that. 60 years ago, the Supreme Court ruled that government cannot organize and promote prayer in public schools. And this is just one of several cases being heard by the court that deals with the clash between church and state. There's some creative learning happening this spring at Jacobs High Tech in Liberty Station. Students are building their way through the biology and humanities curriculum. KPBS education reporter MG Perez tells us how hardware is making a difference in these classrooms.
Let's do the first one and I'll kind of show you the nail gun. We need to refill this today.
Pat Holder is a humanities teacher who uses a nail gun and a hammer and even a saw. Mr. Holder is in the middle of a lesson with his class of 11th grade students at Jacobs High Tech High. The tools are for the furniture they're building while learning about the origins of life, starting with the Big Bang.
Learning happens best through projects, right? And projects give us a chance to do hands-on work, design things and bring them to life, and we can do it all related to the content areas that we teach. So I'm more a teacher than a humanities teacher. We're gonna set you guys up by the bandsaw.
Students in the High Tech High charter school system are used to unconventional learning, but this is really outside the box. The handmade wooden box, that is, or maybe a table. Belin Perea is a junior who says she's learned a lot and gained some real scientific perspective working with wood.
When you're woodworking, when you're working with a piece of wood, that this thing was alive, that this thing had its place on the earth for like hundreds of thousands of years, that it evolved millions and millions of years to become the thing that it is today. And you are working with it to like aid you in your daily life.
Down the hall, students are designing and building more furniture, led by John Santos, who has 18 years of experience teaching environmental science. There are tools hanging on every wall. Visitors to his classroom are often confused, looking around the learning space. Here's what they tell him.
And they make that connection of, I had this experience when I was at high school and it was called wood shop. But what they come to find actually is that this is a biology classroom and an environmental science classroom.
In the mornings, there are much more traditional lessons involving laptops and learning about data collection, science experiments, and assessments. But after lunch each day, students collaborate and create for almost 2.5 hours before the final bell rings. Isaiah Castro hopes to be accepted at UC San Diego. He's taking honors math right now, along with building a table.
You might see a table, but I see it as something that's like super complex, and it's very interesting because this is a table, but it came from basically nothing. It started out as like a single atom, and it turned into everything that's around us.
The classroom concepts aren't always so abstract. There is a large wooden canoe-shaped boat hanging from the ceiling that was built by some of Mr. Santos's science students. He says there were a couple of lessons learned with that project.
This learning experience for a group of students that were investigating how humans have impacted our coastal environment. And when you can do something like build a boat as you're trying to gain an understanding of how we've impacted our coastal environment, it makes it that much more real for you, right?
The sawing and sanding continue throughout the afternoon. Students are also using cameras to capture stop-motion photography that will document every step of their wood-making projects.
I really do like biology and that kind of stuff, but I don't like math.
16-year-old Zemzem Fadhil is direct. She admittedly changes her mind often, not sure what she wants to be when she grows up, but she is sure working with wood is going to help her get there.
When you build things on your own, you end up appreciating it way more, and it's kind of like when you're like cooking. Like if you cook your own food, you're gonna appreciate it a lot more when you know like directly like you made it out of your own hands.
All the furniture built this semester in the science and humanities classes will be sold at the end of the school year as a fundraiser. As for making a good grade in these classes, that's unconventional too. Pat Holder assesses each of his students' strengths. John Santos makes sure these students know they have options.
What kids experience here will benefit them and translate well to any environment. And it doesn't route them along this one path.
The biggest thing we think about for success is engagement. We have learners of different talents, of different levels coming into our space, so I'm not going to ask them to answer a singular question or do a singular task.
That is creative learning. These students will now add to their toolbox.
We've been living in constant war since we were children, and we still manage to have hope for our own futures and the futures of others. And to be able to try to fix this broken world that we were born into, I find that just really inspiring and very hopeful.
You don't need to have a crazy surface area coverage, but it's always the more the better, so.
MG Perez, KPBS News.
We know all about wildfires here in California, but what you're seeing here is video from Nebraska. 15 firefighters were injured and 1 died over the weekend in the southwest part of the state. And it's only April, but the National Interagency Fire Center says the amount of land burned in the U.S. from fires so far this year is outpacing the 10-year average by 30%. We're expecting a dry week here in San Diego. Jessica Pash has your forecast.
We're going to be tracking a number of different waves of low pressure that are going to swing through across California over the remainder of the work week. And along with that, we're not going to be seeing any real rain chances, but there is going to be a little bit of a cooling trend here, especially for the middle to later part of the work week. And then as we head into the weekend, a ridge is going to build back on in, and we're going to start warming things up all over again. So temperatures as we head into tonight, getting down into the upper 40s for you in Oceanside, upper 40s in Ramona, El Cajon getting down to 55, 60 degrees for you tonight in and around San Diego. As we head into Tuesday, here's that dip in the jet stream. It's going to be pushing on through. It's a pretty weak trough that is moving in here, but it is likely going to push some of the warmth out of California, move it more towards the interior southwest here. So as we move forward, you'll notice that temperatures are generally going to be on the decline here, likely as we move from Wednesday into Thursday and Friday, though Tuesday should still be pretty nice and warm out there. 70 degrees for you in San Diego, 83 in Ramona. We're looking at 90s on the board for Borrego Springs. Temperatures right around 95 degrees for your daytime high. And then here we go. Look at that trend here near the coast. Temperatures not cooling off a whole lot, but we'll get back down into mid to upper 60s for you as we push towards Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then temperatures look to rebound again as we head into next weekend, back up into the 70s. Further inland, temps go from the 80s on Tuesday to the 70s on Wednesday. By Thursday, we'll be in the upper 60s with a good amount of fog likely early in the morning, sunshine as we head into the afternoon. And just as quickly as we cooled off, we'll be rebounding back into the 70s Friday, 80s by the time we get into next Saturday. In the mountains, temperatures do cool off here back into the 50s for you Thursday and Friday, rebounding back up into the 60s on Saturday. Could see a little bit of a breeze likely picking up here for your Thursday and Friday too. And in the deserts, we're looking at temperatures dropping from the 90s Tuesday and Wednesday back into the 80s Thursday and Friday, and then rebounding as we head into next Saturday. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Jessica Pash.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, Elon Musk buys Twitter. What this means for the social media giant and free speech. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Whether you are the first or the 1,000th, when it comes to a life-saving surgery, you're grateful to survive. And as David Louie reports, a California man in need of a lung transplant is celebrating with the hospital and extending lives.
They're calling 60-year-old Patrick Alexander patient number 1,000. The Fresno insurance agent is recovering from being the 1,000th lung transplant at UCSF since the program began in 1991.
We don't know much about the donor family or the donor, his or herself, but we're just so grateful.
Alexander had scarring of the lung that impeded the ability for oxygen to enter the bloodstream. UCSF's transplant expertise is world-class.
The 1-year survival is really a top
in the country, and it has been that way for over a decade. And our long-term survival has also continued to really improve every year, so that patients now getting a transplant have an expectation that they can live, nearly 12 years.
In about a year, Alexander is expected to be able to resume an active life of travel, exercise, and other activities. Post-transplant complications are now rare.
We went from 19%, almost 19 to 20% airway complications requiring some sort of intervention down to less than 1% now. Which is quite remarkable because no other program has been able to achieve that outcome.
Now, Patrick Alexander can expect to extend his life 10 to 12 years.
A year ago, we didn't even know Patrick had this disease. This is how quickly it progressed. And we are just so grateful for the staff at UCSF. They have been so thorough.
That was David Louie reporting. An influential social network will soon be in the hands of one of the world's richest people. Twitter announced today it's in an agreement to sell the company to Tesla CEO Elon Musk for $44 billion. The company initially resisted the offer. Twitter is publicly traded and will go private once the sale is complete. That's a story that will be getting a lot of attention in the days ahead. So you can tune in to Morning Edition for more on the sale of Twitter and what it could mean for political debate and misinformation as we approach another election season. And then on KPBS Midday Edition, a conversation with San Diego-based novelist Don Winslow about his latest book, City on Fire. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.